Welcome to the Love Fly podcast. Paul Tizard, Fear Flying coach, and today's guest is Janis Hetherington, who has joined us via the Love Fly Facebook group, and we're looking forward to hearing her story. So, welcome, Janis.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited.
No, thank you. So we're dying to know about your story. I like it when we get real people, you're a real person, talk about what's happened to them, what they've done with their fear, how they got the fear, and all that sort of stuff. So start us off. How did you end up in the Love Fly group? And tell us your story basically, and don't keep dropping me in the basket.
Let me wedge this so it stops doing that. I got it. So what happened was, it's very interesting because first, before I even tell the story, I can tell you that I've never had a bad experience on a plane. And in my 20s, I used to fly a lot. I grew up in the north of England, and I used to fly on tiny planes over to Belgium on a whim. I just would hop on, drink wine, and if the plane was bumpy, I used to laugh. One time I had red wine spilled all over my shirt when I arrived, and I just thought it was hilarious. And then all of a sudden, I think I was maybe about 28. I flew from London to Boston in around 1992-ish, and I had a panic attack. And I did not use any tools to manage the panic attack. So the whole flight from London to Boston, I was in a state of complete panic.
Do you have any idea where that came from?
Well, I tend to suffer from anxiety and panic attacks anyway.
Right.
But I think that because it happened on the plane, there was nothing about being on the plane, really. Probably just the lack of control, like we all have, but nothing. What seems to have happened was my brain decided, because I had such a long panic attack, that it was now I have to stay off planes.
Oh, goodness. How long ago was this?
That was around 1992-ish.
Oh, wow. Right. Okay. Go on. Keep going. That's great. So, well, not great, obviously, for you, but, wow.
So actually what happened was I didn't take any medication or nothing, because I didn't anticipate the flight would be difficult, because I never had a problem with flying before. So suddenly I'm on the plane, and I'm having that horrible experience internally, not externally. Nothing was wrong with the flight. And when I arrived in Boston, I was in bed for about 5 days recovering from the flight, or recovering from the anxiety, I should say, from the whole experience. So then, of course, I was terrified to fly back, because I still lived in the north of England. So I'm like, so I spent the whole rest of the time panicking about how I'm going to get back. So that was tough.
Yeah.
So after that, I had a severe fear of flying, which became, I would say it was another phobia that I had. It became a phobia.
Yeah.
So at that point, I would, if I even was watching a movie and they show the inside of the plane, I'd start feeling nauseated. If I drove past the airport, I'd be like, thank God I'm not flying, those poor people. Just all this, so unaware of what I was doing to myself too.
So that 1992, you had all that going on, but you're in California now. So we're thinking, well, how on earth do you get there? By boat. So so that sounds pretty severe there, and you had anxiety anyway, which in other aspects of your life. So what happened next?
Well, then I had the opportunity to move to California, and I thought, okay, I'll go do that.
When was that?
That was 93. I moved over to California in 93, and had the same approach to flying, which was horrendous. But I did it. And I don't think I had any medication to help with that, because in England, I know they don't give you anti-anxiety medication very easily. So I honestly don't recall much about that flight, which is interesting.
Yeah, so you came over in 93.
Yeah.
And then what? So I mean, in the US, you can't get. I mean, I know you can drive everywhere, but flying is very accessible, isn't it?
Very. But I realized, or didn't realize, I accepted and had this mindset of I'm now grounded for the rest of my life. And
Oh, wow.
flying was never going to be an option. I was not open to addressing it, hearing about it, reading about it. It was just absolutely not an option. That's it. Stuck in California for the rest of my life. And I did road trips for something like 27 years.
Oh, wow.
And that's,
Yeah. There's a lot of road there as well. Crikey. So you drove everywhere, all around the US, and
yeah,
goodness me.
yeah. Because flying was, I didn't care if I was on a bus or a car for weeks, as long as
Mm,
I'm on the ground.
yeah. So it became so embedded from that 93 flight. So when you made it over in 94,
Mhm.
but that's it. You've just so
Yeah,
27 years.
yes. And it was a very, very rigid mindset of any time it came up in conversation that people, about travel, I would just say, no, I don't fly. I haven't been anywhere. I've moved to the US and I haven't flown since.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I'll let you ask questions because I feel
No,
like I
no,
could
go on.
talk.
Just yeah, just tell us your story. It's great.
Okay. Well, all of my family still live in the north of England. So I did not go back to visit them about 26 years. I never
Right.
went back.
Right.
And then my parents started getting older. They had me when they were young, so they're still relatively young, but they start developing health problems. And, life, you just realize as you get older that life, we're not here forever. And you can't just postpone something for the next
Mm,
50 years anymore. So I realized, okay, I have to fly. So I actually, what I did was I joined a different Overcome Your Fear of Flying group on Facebook. I found nothing in it of value. The people were nice, but just nothing clicked for me at all.
mm,
I read books, I listened to various meditations, just nothing was touching it.
yeah.
So I thought, well, I'll just have to knock myself out. I take Xanax for flying, and I just thought I'll just knock myself out. So that's the only way I could do it. And so prior to, I actually did a practice flight maybe 2 years ago
Right.
to San Francisco, medicated. And I recall nothing about it. So it's kind of
Mm,
cheating in a way because your body's on the plane, but
yeah.
you are
So
not really.
yeah, yeah. So like Mr. T, you just got knocked out.
Yes. So then going back to the flight, getting back to England, I had to go see my parents. So I booked a flight December 2019, right before the pandemic. And I spent about 4 months
Mm,
not sleeping. Like I've seen all the other people in the group say, not sleeping, not eating, just complete panic and feeling like
yes.
I just can't do it. I'm going to have to cancel.
Yeah, yeah.
It's about approximately 11-hour flight. And then, of course, they live in the north of England, so I'm supposed to get a flight from London up to Newcastle, which I was not willing to do. So we drove, but I did the flight, but I was medicated.
Right.
So
But it's still impressive. So what was it like then? So for the 26 years, 26, 27 years, you never went back. So did they come to visit you? When how did it work?
they came over 2 times, my
Right.
parents. Yeah, or maybe three. Yeah. But then they got too old to fly. They lost confidence. And, as you get into your 70s, it's just not really very inviting for some people to fly and
Mm,
travel that far.
mm.
So,
So that it just goes to show, doesn't it, the impact of once the fear takes hold that you can't even get back. That's quite tremendous. So 2019, before the pandemic, you took a flight, drugged up,
mhm.
and then
Yep.
how did then what happened next? How did you find us? Well, what happened after that?
I think I found you through a fellow person who was working on their flying issue in a different group.
Mm,
She's British also, and she recommended your group. And once I found it, I don't I don't know, there's something completely different about the approach, and it really grabbed my attention. So I started listening to the podcasts, possibly before the 2019 flight, I'm not sure. But I have flown again back to England, June of this year. So actually, I think it was this year that I've discovered your group.
Okay.
Okay, so yes, that's when it was. So 2019, I didn't know about your support group, but I listened to the podcasts prior to my flight this year. And for some reason, it just grabbed my attention. And I think what it was about it was you addressed the thinking behind it, rather than, I think the other groups I'd been in only were focused on exposure and desensitization, not really the psychology so much. Right. And I needed the psychology, because something I don't want to forget to share with you that has been absolutely mind-blowing for me through learning this from your group is that I just took another flight last weekend up to San Jose from San Diego. It was about an hour and a half. Took very little Xanax because I wanted to progress and everything. But this is the biggest thing I have learned, and it's so transferable to the whole rest of life. It's absolutely life-changing, because what I learned is it's not the plane, it's not the flight. It is my thinking. It's my outlook on it. Because on both of those flights, nothing happened unpleasant. Not one thing. I sat in the front seat. It was beautiful out the window. Everyone was nice. Tiny little bit of bumps. So to experience it, like being awake and conscious, like, why did I have such a completely debilitating phobia of this?
Yes.
When there's really nothing about it. Of course, there's discomfort. Especially for someone who has an anxious personality, have anxiety and phobias. It's you're confined and you can't get out if you panic and things. But anyway, the most important point I feel that don't want to forget is, now that I've learned that, you can apply that to the rest of life. It's not
very heavy stuff, Janis.
It really is, because I'm in my 50s now and I've lived with a certain mindset. I tried to evolve, but now I've realized my fear of flying is like probably the second biggest fear I've ever had. And I've just been flying, discovering that there was nothing to be afraid of.
How annoying.
I was grounded for 27 years because of my mindset.
Yeah. I mean, that's quite profound. I'm quite struck by that. I mean, that's 27 years. Do you know what I mean?
It's huge, because not only now do I feel like I can travel and see some of the world, I can also know that I have this tendency to completely catastrophize, and you don't have to think that way. There are other ways to think, because we come so entrenched in our thoughts and so used to living with that mindset and way of thinking, we're not even conscious of it anymore. Yeah. So that's the biggest thing I've learned from this group, is to change my way of thinking. It's very surreal to sit on the plane with only a tiny, tiny bit of medication and look around and think, this is actually really nice. And to land, I mean, it's only a short flight. I went from San Diego to San Jose, but I ended up next to the Golden Gate Bridge an hour and a half later. And for people who fly, that's normal. For me, I was like, oh my God, all of a sudden I'm in San Francisco. People live like this. So now I'm trying to look at the rest of my life and think, how can I change my thoughts? How can I change the way I view things to expand and experience life in a different way? So this work that you're doing and providing for people is not only allowing us to experience traveling the world and seeing our loved ones and having more freedom, but I think if you are open to it, it can make you also become conscious of how you think about everything else in your life. Are we rigid in our thoughts? Is there some room for more of an open mind and a different way of looking and experiencing something?
That's quite a scary responsibility. I don't want to think like that. That's on you. As Captain Ron would say, don't blame your success on us. You've done that.
I think you need to though, because I suspect I'm not the only one. Because
Well,
when your fear of flying is so significant, it cannot only be the change can't only be confined to the flying. I don't think when you're
no,
overcoming fear.
no, that's a fair point actually. So just so to sort of help, because in a way you've kind of leapfrogged into sort of the end bit, which is great.
Yeah.
But well, I guess what I'm curious about is, what were the bits that you listened to? What in particular messages that, so somebody else is listening thinking, I want a bit of that. What was your process, or which ones did you listen to? How often? That type of thing. How did you do it?
Honestly, I don't remember which episodes. I did stay look through the group and choose the ones that people said were most important to start with.
Mm.
I don't remember specifically which ones, but I listened to them most days of the week. I would go on walks and listen to them while walking, so there's no distractions.
What about, so you said there's some psychological stuff which you found particularly helpful. What sort of stuff was that? I'm curious,
That,
because we just, we started and just did
yes,
what thought was right. And so it's really interesting when you've got a comparison to where another group runs and stuff, because I did look at what other people were doing, but I didn't particularly, I just had some tips from somebody who said, this is how you set up a Facebook group to work best, and
right,
do this and do it, show up every week. And so I just literally
right.
followed that. I
Yeah.
haven't done anything special, just literally just followed someone else's advice
Mm,
about running it. So that's really
right.
interesting to me, and nice to hear. But also, I'm really curious, like, what's the psychological stuff that you think has helped you in particular?
I think the piece that your group has that the other groups I was in did not have is being aware of the way you think, taking control of your thoughts, taking control of your body, its reactions to fear. The other groups I experienced only focused on, which I know you have and is definitely helpful, is the noises we hear in the plane, the procedures, what things mean, all of that's helpful because the education does help instead of just going, oh my God. Like I used to have a thing about the beeps. Each time the beep would go off, whatever it's called, the ding, I would panic. But
Yeah.
now I just relax and think it's not up to me to deal with that. So the content of your group helps with the educational aspect of
Mm.
not understanding what's going on, but taking control of the adrenaline that we have with the breathing exercises, noticing your body, and just taking control of not allowing yourself to spiral and then end up in a complete panic.
Mm.
And the weird thing is, I have been a yoga teacher since about 1980 something. And I know about breathing, and know about like managing panic attacks, and I never applied it to flying. So I think the combination of how you presented it, I remembered to use those skills that I already had, which I think a
Yeah.
lot of people who are anxious have those, but we
Mm.
forget when it comes to something as big as being on a plane. I don't know if that makes sense, but basically being aware of your thinking and
Yeah.
addressing it and choosing to have control over
Mm.
it instead of just surrendering to complete panic, debilitating anxiety when it
Yeah.
comes to flying. So I hope that makes sense because that's definitely was the important part for me that helped.
Yeah, it does. I mean, my interpretation of what you're saying is the fact that, like a lot of people, you've got resources, but you haven't linked them. And a lot of people, I always say that we're much more resourceful than we realize, and people have done amazing things and continue to do amazing things, but they're unable to make the link to the flying thing.
Yes,
It's so they sort of
yes,
go into sort of a freeze and forget. I mean, there
yes.
you are as a yoga guru, probably, and you haven't made the link, and yet you're better trained in the breathing stuff than most people I come across. So it's
Because
it's an
I had
interesting link.
it is because I've had anxiety and panic attacks since the age of 15. I'm 57. I've controlled panic attacks and anxiety my whole life through breathing, yoga, exercise. not medication, but the flying remained its own entity over here.
Mm,
That was like nothing would help with that. That was
yeah.
my way of thinking. I can control my panic if I'm in the street, if I'm in my car, but flying's a whole other thing.
Mm,
But it's actually not true.
no.
And I didn't know that for a long time.
I mean, when you hear yourself say that now, does that sound, it must seem weird thinking that you've had all that training and skills and experience and you hadn't been able to apply it.
No, it was, and I think looking back, it was a decision. If I had been open to it, I could have thought, you know how to control these things. You know the
Mm,
signal that your body gives. You know what the breathing does. But
yes.
it's like, yeah, well, but that doesn't mean I'm not gonna do it on a plane though. It was like very, very stubborn. Like the plane is not an option. Flying's not an option. And my
Yeah.
mind was completely closed. And I think it would have stayed closed if I hadn't found your group, to be honest. I would have just thought, well, my brother can take care of my parents. I just simply can't fly there. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I mean, that's a huge thing, isn't it? To think
Mm-hmm.
I literally can't go over there just because of this fear. I mean, that's the cost of it, isn't it? It's the impact. And I think that's something I've always believed is that thinking about what's the impact, what is this fear serving me? Because it's not.
It's not, and it's a really huge thing. For example, my brother had two children. I've had two children here, and he and I had never met each other's kids until 2019.
Mm,
His kids are in their 20s, mine are late teens, and they'd never met because of
yeah,
my fear of flying.
yeah,
This is big, big. It really impacts you a lot. It's not only about traveling to the Bahamas and seeing Hawaii and the beautiful beaches. It's being able to see loved
yeah,
ones and
yeah. No, I
people
think
perhaps who need medical things, stuff like that.
yeah, it is. I know for many years I used to think it was a little a bit sort of flimsy, like it's just fear of flying because I don't quite know how it ended up with me doing it, but it did. And I used to think it was a bit sort of flim flam, it's like, oh, it's just a bit of fear of, it's just to help people go on holiday. And although I knew it wasn't, but I used to sort of almost talk myself down with it, thinking,
Mm.
well, and then over time I started to think, actually, this is not about that. This is about choices.
Yes.
And there's sort of like it became like an epiphany to me. I just thought, actually, this thing stops you having choices. And if you've got no choices, then it's running your life, and in lots of ways, because it sort of creeps into other aspects, doesn't it? Because you have a sort of definition of yourself, like, I'm a nervous flyer, therefore in some way I'm defunct, or something, So I'm thinking actually, I think you're right. It's much, much bigger than just going on some jolly, isn't it? It's
It really is.
life
Because
choices.
absolutely. And it's not even just a fearful flyer. It's just, I don't fly. I don't like motion. I never will fly. I don't like boats. I have friends who go out on the boat. They're like, come on, it's lovely. Have a beer, listen to some music. I'm like, what's enjoyable about that?
Well, you say, oh, great fun you do.
I know.
No, I'm not doing it. Sorry. Um, so, so this is really interesting. So now you are flying with a little bit of Xanax. Xanax, how
Tiny
you say it? Yeah,
mm-hmm.
tiny bit. I don't know what that is. But I guess is it like diazepam? Is it that sort of?
Yes, it's the
that
same
sort of
as
family?
Valium and all of those things. It's out of the system more quickly.
Right. Okay.
So yeah. So this time when I flew from San Diego to San Jose, on the flight back, I wanted to take none just as a triumph, but my mind was calm and I wasn't panicking. I was standing there, the first one to get on, but I was physically having a lot of adrenaline and it was making my whole body tingle. And I thought, I don't want to have a panic attack. So I took a tiny bit, just a teeny bit, take the edge off. And what happened was I experienced things on a flight I never have before. And they were a little bit scary, but intriguing rather than panic. So, like when you take off, the engines are very, very powerful. And I didn't know because I haven't flown when I'm really
When you're
coherent.
alive. Yeah.
Exactly. I'm usually a dead body on the
Resuscitate me at the end of the flight, please. Yeah.
You should hear my 16-year-old daughter's account of flying to England the first time, because she was my flying companion, and that was a whole lot of things that happened because I was basically dead in the seat. But this time, the engines are so, so powerful for takeoff. This is a new experience for me, really loud and powerful. And I didn't know that once you reach a certain height, things go really calm and quiet. So I was like, oh, we're going to fall from the sky, because I've never felt it before.
No.
But I just trusted it because I've been learning enough about the process. And I just thought, it's okay. You haven't experienced this before. I'm sure it's normal. Nobody else is panicking.
No.
It's okay.
Yes, you've got you. So you're the thing I like is that you're curious about it now, because you're like, oh,
yes,
I'm noticing things.
Very curious. I took a picture of the inside of the door when it was closed. I was able to watch what everybody does. I was
What a
staring at
great
the air.
sort of holiday photo that is, isn't it? Here's the
It
inside
is.
of the door. Here's my seat. Oh,
But yeah,
great, Janis.
but
Yeah,
yeah,
thanks. Yeah.
I
Got any
know my
more?
daughter said I can't. My daughter says I can't stand you and your videos of the inside of the plane and the clouds. It's just so boring. Who wants to see that? I said, you would be surprised how many people love to see the
Yeah.
inside of the door and the shape of the seats and how many there are. Just like, oh my God. Look, everyone, the door's closed. I must have stared at the staff for a very long, like the entire flight, because one of them looked at me and she said, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yeah, I'm good." But I was just, looking at them for reassurance, even though I was doing okay.
Yeah, a lot of people watch the crew. I think I'm 50-50 on that. I think there's something, if they just look like they're not bothered, then you can kind of take some comfort from that. But also,
yeah,
they're also at work, and so they're not really monitoring their faces.
No, that's true.
You might see something that worries you when they've just run out of beef or chicken,
And you're like, oh no, we've dropped 600 feet.
Yeah, no, and they've run out of chicken. Yeah, so it's easy to sort of read into these things, isn't it? So
Yes,
it sounds like you're making great. So you are flying. You're taking a little bit of Xanax. You're starting to be curious about the process. You're seeing all that sort of stuff. You're taking videos of the inside of doors and of seats. So it's pretty adrenaline fueled stuff.
it is.
So what's next? What's the plan?
Well, what's next is I know I still have a lot of challenges because ahead. I don't want to get too confident in my thing of, because I've only had good flights. It's ever
They're all
since
good
I've begun.
flights. As long as the number of
Are they?
landings, as long as the number of landings equal the number of takeoffs, it's a good flight. What more
That's
do you want?
true. That's true. I need it to be completely smooth the entire time. I can handle maybe 2 minutes of bumpiness. No, I'm kidding. What's next for me is I made a couple of notes. Well, yeah, I don't know if you saw, your group is very active, but I initially accidentally booked myself onto a very small, well, in my mind, a very small plane. It only seats 76 people. And when I booked it, I told myself, I'm so evolved now. I'm not even going to look at what kind of plane it is. I'm just going to show up. And then I looked at what plane it was, and I'm like,
Was
no
that the
way.
Embraer bit, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was it. And I was like, nope, I'm not getting on that. So I still don't want to fly on that. So I have a credit with that airline. If I wanted to make a big step forward, I feel like I would fly on that plane, and I'm not ready to do that yet.
Okay.
So I'm going to use the credits to go on what I consider a normal, acceptable size plane.
You're a bit fussy
So
then.
I'll book just a little.
So what meets your criteria then?
I don't really like the size of the planes that fly from the north to the south and back and forth in England, but I've gotten used to it. I'll tell you a little moment that helped me so much. When I arrived, and I was in London and boarding the plane to Newcastle, and I saw the size of the plane, and I wasn't ready for that. And I panicked and went to see the pilots, and I said, I didn't, and I'd had taken Xanax, and it's embarrassing. And I said, I didn't know the plane was this size. And they're looking at me like, God, what are we supposed to say to this woman carrying her mountains of pillows and her like everything, all of her accessories. This seems really weird. And they tried saying all these things to comfort me, and nothing worked. And then the younger pilot looked at me and he said, "Do you know the flight's only 40 minutes?" I said, "It is? I can do that." And I turned around and went and sat happily in my seat because I thought, it's 40 minutes, I can do this.
And then he
But I
breathed
think
a sigh of relief and, God, she's gone.
exactly.
Take your pillows
Oh
with
my
you. Yeah.
God. Let's hope we don't have any more of those on the plane.
Okay. So that's interesting, isn't it? So you've made a sort of a rule there that you can sort of withstand something for a certain amount of time.
Yes.
This is quite common, by the way, that people, some
Is it?
people won't fly over. They'll say, I can do up to 3 hours, but I
Right.
won't do, I won't do 4 hours, or I can. There's little rules that we set ourselves. So you kind of put one, but not knocking it. It's still phenomenal progress. So this tiny aircraft we're talking about, which is probably still was it 100-seater or something?
Probably about the same size as the one I took recently up the coast last weekend, about 100 and maybe 140 people or something.
Oh yeah, tiny then.
Yeah. I only like 500 and above.
Yeah,
But
of
yes,
course. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I
I
don't think
still
you're gonna get
have
anything
lots.
that like that flying to Newcastle, but there you go.
Who wants to go there? Oops, no offense, anyone. I still have a lot of restrictions and a lot of rules. I don't want to get on a tiny plane. I can do more than 2 hours because I've flown to England and back, but
Mm,
I have to sit a certain way. I've found that sitting in the very front seat is so much easier because I don't see I don't like all the people crammed around me. That
yeah.
makes me very claustrophobic. So when I sit at the front, I can block everything out behind
Yeah.
me, and it's just me and my little seat. That
So
was
can I
a
just ask then, just a
yeah.
curious question? If you're on a train and it was full, would that be the same thing for you? So is it, is it, or is it
I
just
wouldn't
more,
care.
is it aircraft? Oh, so right, it's aircraft specific then. Okay.
It is, yes.
Interesting.
Yes, it is.
But you're making
So
progress. You're making progress. So you're starting to
definitely,
you're working out what your patterns are at the moment, and it sounds like you're
yeah,
you're playing with them a bit,
I am playing.
experimenting.
I am. And I do have a lot of stipulations. For example, a friend of mine just flew from the north of California to Vegas, and I'm not willing to fly into Vegas because it's especially not in the summer because it's very hot there and it's mountainous. So there's pockets of air. And most people who fly there have told me it's a very, very bumpy flight. So I'm not going to fly to Vegas. It's only a six
Yet,
hour drive.
yet. How about
At
yet?
some point in the
Yes.
winter, some point I will do it when it's not so bumpy.
Right, well, you might be bumpy anyway. I mean, that's what you want, really, isn't it? So you're doing so well. So we need something with a bit more action going on, don't you? So that you can practice some
I
of your
suppose.
yeah.
I
You'll thank
suppose.
me, honestly. So because
Right?
it's great. You're doing really well, and what I love is the fact that you're challenging some of these rules, but
Yes.
there are still some there that you've got to work with, which is quite normal. And I quite like the fact that you've come on the podcast not as the finished article, but as somebody who's
Mm.
made some progress, but also can see that you've got some stuff to do. And I think that's nice and realistic.
Actually, I appreciate that because I was feeling disappointed that I'm having a podcast with you, but I'm not completely cured. But that's also helpful for other people because as we've seen, it's not a straight line. There's going to be times where you feel like you're doing fantastic, and then you'll have a
Mm,
downfall. Hopefully, it doesn't set you too far back. But I think we tend to have this mindset. I feel like yes, I've made a lot of progress, and I'm really proud, and it's very empowering. But then my mind does this thing again of, yeah, but you're only doing well because your flights have been smooth. It's like
oh
there's
yeah, yeah. It's funny. It's not funny, but it's an interesting thing that basically what happens is that people who are fighting a fear of flying will take a flight, and then unless they're 100% perfect, they kick the crap out of themselves afterwards and
yeah,
say, yeah, but you didn't. I've had people on courses, and I think I've told this story before, but people have, they've not flown for 30 years or 40 years, and then when they land, I'll say to them, how was that? And they say, oh, I cried on takeoff. I'm really disappointed with myself. I said, yeah, but
Mhm.
you took off. You went. It'll be a bit more compassionate to yourself,
Yeah.
because it's not like a tick box thing. It's had a long time been practicing being scared, and so
Yeah.
it's going to take a little while to unpick that. So I think you're doing
It is.
amazing.
Thanks. I don't know why we do that to ourselves, but we do. We don't just celebrate and think, wow, I'm doing great. The mind just plays games with us all the time. And I think there's no bigger way really to see that than when you have a fear of flying that keeps you grounded for so, so long. And then you
Mm,
actually fly and you're like, this is it. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's
no,
nothing like the mind has built it up to be.
no.
Are there things you were going to ask? Are there things I still need to do? My work? Yes, one of my goals is I want to fly with no medication, no sedatives at all, and to be able to manage the feelings that come up.
Yeah. Doesn't sound like you're too far away from that, actually.
No, I'm not. And if I hadn't had that adrenaline happening at the airport at the gate, I really wanted to do that last flight with nothing, but
Mm,
I didn't just get a grip, you know. And I didn't really know that if your mind is calm, well, actually, I did know that. I just didn't know it with reference to flying. I do know that sometimes you're not having anxious thoughts, but your body is still having an anxious response,
yeah.
physiological response.
Well,
That needs.
I suppose it's a bit of a form of muscle memory, isn't it? You sort of
Mhm.
we know how to do that. Our bodies remembered it, and so it's very easy
Yeah.
to. And also, we can misread physiological things. So, might feel like hungry and feel
Mhm.
like, oh, actually, I feel a bit giddy. Therefore, it could be, and
Yeah.
so we will misinterpret it because it is a sort of a circle type thing. I don't
Yeah.
know why I'm signaling what a circle looks like, because it's an audio podcast, for goodness sake. But yeah, so it's cyclical, isn't it? So I think that's
It is.
quite normal. Oh, yeah,
Because I
it
could
sounds
have
like
had that.
amazing. It's amazing.
I could. I'm just excited to talk about this. I could
Mm.
have had the same physiological experience in a different circumstance, and I would not have taken anything for it because I would have thought it's just adrenaline. I can just breathe this away. It will pass.
Yeah,
But I didn't want to do that whilst I'm walking onto the plane.
no. And I can understand that, because this, what you've achieved, has a sort of a fragile feel about it at the moment. It feels like you're kind of treating it with kid gloves, and don't want to, just go full throttle like I'm fine and go cartwheeling onto an aircraft. You're taking it quite carefully, aren't you? So sort of, and so I understand why you might have just thought about I better have something. I don't want to
That's a
ruin it.
really great, very, very good point because I also don't want to do anything to get any big setback. That's why I wasn't willing to fly on the smaller plane because I feel like I'm doing well and I'm not ready to have a big setback because I'm afraid of falling too far back and then going into that place of nope, I hate flying, I'm not doing
Mm,
it. Absolutely necessary because I would like to fly somewhere nice.
yeah. It sounds like you're making some, nice steady progress, and I do think it is more wiggly than direct for most people.
I,
It tends to be 5 step forwards and then 10 steps back, and I've even had people come on the podcast who've done really well and had a complete setback at some point, and
Mhm.
then felt like
Yeah.
they've failed in some way. It's just like it's not the case. It's just it gets a
Mhm.
hold. And the gremlin's been there for a while. The little bastard pops
Yes.
up again every now and then.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Did
does
those
his
people
work.
manage? Did they
Uh,
manage to overcome that big fallback and keep going
most
forward?
there's one at the moment who I have high hopes for, but needs a little bit more work. But yeah, most have got back, and I think the most important thing is what you do next. So blips or
Yes.
setbacks are inevitable.
Yes.
They're completely in. It's what you do next, and I'm saying it like I'm some sort of expert. I'm not. Just seen it so many times. I don't
Right.
know if I've never had to fight a fear of flying. I don't know what that's like.
Mm.
So I've had other things, but just I can only imagine what it's like where you think I'm going to die. This is gonna,
Yes.
it's what it is, isn't it? It's not like
It is.
when people think, public speaking is meant to be up there with the top three fears. and people think
Yes.
they're going to die, but they're not going to die.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm getting wiped out by a flip chart, but but in aircraft, there's a slight something could happen to you. So there is a little bit of logic there, isn't there? Even though
Well,
it's completely out of proportion.
But you know what's interesting though? People have said to me so many times, and it really bugs me because, but they mean well, but they always would say flying is the safest form of transport. And I would want to, I'm not going to repeat what I'd like to say to them when they say that, because I'm not actually afraid of dying in a plane. I never have been.
Mm.
My thing is claustrophobia and loss of control. I've never worried about it's going to crash into the mountains, or we're going to just, the engines will die and we'll just crash into the sea. I've never ever cared or worried about that. So I forgot what my point was about that. But yeah, yes, there is.
Annoying people.
Yes, annoying people saying, but it's the safest form of travel.
I know people
That
used to
just,
say to me, well, yeah, I used to hear some really helpful, inverted commas, like they'd say, yeah, but got more chance of being kicked to death by a donkey. It's just like, how's that even helpful, or relevant? I don't know any donkeys, but I think people mean well. But the
they
other thing
do.
is that, and I think this is quite a common thing, and Michael Comyn was talking about this. There's something I've noticed is that the other thing happens as well. So you say to somebody, I don't like flying, and then they give you their story of death, don't they? Or
Yes.
their Magaluf plummet story, which is what I always used to say. And just think, how is that helpful? I've just told you I don't like it. So now you're going to tell me some crappy story, which isn't even true, about your experience, but they're not scared.
I'm impressed by your group and by the work you teach, considering you don't have never experienced a fear of flying. That's very interesting. I mean, I didn't think you would have because of your background, the little that I know about it. So it's interesting that you're providing a service to people of something that's very, very debilitating and significant, and you've never actually experienced that. That's quite an achievement also, because usually you need to be able to relate in some way to be able to address a struggle someone has.
Well, I
So,
can relate to fear, but I can't, it's not that I can't relate to it. It's just that I haven't had that specific thing. And
right.
also there's a good argument. So it's like, to be a counsellor, do you need to have experienced every form of loss to be a good
That's true.
counsellor? So you could
That's
say,
absolutely
so you might have higher empathy, but does that necessarily mean you're any more effective? Like not every midwife is given birth, and if they had, they might have like if they had an easy delivery, then would then think, oh, come on, pull yourself together,
yeah.
So I don't know whether it's necessary to have experienced, but having seen it firsthand, I think just also being a coach, and how hard it is to change habits. Just I think about myself trying to stick to a diet or go to the gym regularly, how hard it is just to stick to a plan. So I'm always amazed at what people do the 30-day program. I think, how are you doing that? Because I've done what I did, a 30-day program, which is what inspired me to put one on something. But I literally, by about day 22, I had to almost like sellotape myself to the screen to watch it, because I just didn't want to do it. I couldn't be bothered anymore, and think these people that are doing it. So I'm really impressed that people do these things, because it takes some resolve, doesn't it, to do stuff like that.
It does. I'm amazed you got to 22 days. I usually cannot get through the first day.
Well, there you go.
But that is a very good point, though. You don't have to have experienced something to have empathy and skills to address it and support others going through it. That's true. That's
It
the
is,
thing.
yeah. Fear is fear. Yeah, you're right. And the basis of learning a fear is pretty much the same, and maintaining it is the same. You could apply it to anything. But there's the other thing that's going on with the group, which I think is phenomenal, and I'm totally blown away by it, is by how much everyone's helping each other. So what
Yes.
started off with a couple of us kind of posting when we could, now it's like there's people just on it all the time, just willingly giving their time to support others, which I think is really important in terms of beating a fear, because it's reinforcing your own journey as well. So I think I know the best way to learn anything is to teach someone else, but it's just going
Yes.
on in the group. I'm gobsmacked. I can't thank people enough for what they're doing. It's just phenomenal. And some people I see a lot, but others I see pop up. I've never seen them before. I just think, who are you? And how are you so helpful? And then they disappear again. It's just amazing. So I'm very grateful for that. Us love fly a lot, look at that and go, this is just mind blowing, and it's hopefully it'll keep going, because as the numbers grow, I have a little bit of a worry that that it might lose something of that supportive nature, where it just gets which is I suppose it's a nice problem to have, but it's just so that's my hope, is that it stays, whatever it is that you liked about it, it keeps doing that.
That's a very understandable concern, because having been in lots of different Facebook groups, the larger they get, and you have, it's a public forum and there are people, and people are not always easy. And I've been on Facebook since it came out, and this is the only group I have been in where there's never, ever anyone saying anything disrespectful, rude, unkind. There is nothing but compassion, respect. And that's very, very unusual on a public forum online.
Yeah.
I feel like you're attracting a certain kind of people that just I don't know. I do hope it stays that way. I'm pretty sure it will, because to me, that's just the energy and the feel the group has. There's a lot of compassion and kindness, no judgment, I think there's a lot of empathy in the whole crowd.
Yeah, it is amazing. Oh yeah, I'm glad you can see that. I think so too. And I think that when he removes one person, but if anything was like that, there's been a couple of comments which I've thought, not sure about that, so then, but somebody normally spots it and we jump on it. But it's been I just want it to stay a safe place. That's why I made it private group pretty soon. So it isn't, you've got to join and then you've got to go through a couple of questions. And if people don't say, I agree to the rules, we don't let them in. Right. And it's I know it's a tick box thing and they might not even look at them, but it just gives us some sort of level of protection that they're agreeing to it. And the rules are pretty simple, but it's just if people don't tick that, they don't get in.
Yeah. And people, I think, who are not willing to do those things to, remain positive and kind and respectful, they don't really have the patience to even tick the boxes.
Yeah, I think some people just are sort of like a bit stressed, and so there's some really nice people that have not done that, and then they've come back and they've done all the stuff, and then we go, great. Right. And so I do get that, but I do think you're right. It makes me think, well, if you can't even tick that, then I'm not sure. But thankfully there's lots of lovely people in the group, and let's hope it stays that way.
I think it will. It's a really wonderful, I'm eternally grateful, honestly. And if I can come back and share anything with anyone, that's why I'm so excited to talk with you, is because it's such a huge thing that does carry over into the rest of your life. Yes. I'm very thankful that I get to speak with you about it, to thank you.
Thank you for you. I'm really grateful to have a real person come on and tell their story, I was intrigued by yours when I saw how long since you hadn't flown. I thought, that's we want to know the details, we want the deets. So the other thing I was going to say was, so just to sort of because I'm aware of the time it's flown by, what's your bit of advice for anybody that's struggling, maybe where you are, maybe not as far as you are right now? Anything, what would be your consolidated wisdom to finish with?
That I think the fear lies within us. It's not the plane, it's not the flight, it's our own fear. And we have to search for whatever means we can to soothe the fear, not beat it, because you cannot beat it. You have to meet it with whatever tools, whether it's breathing, whether it's yoga, whatever, meditation. Learn ways to soothe the nervous system, because really the most mind-blowing thing for me was, it's not the flight and it's not the plane, it's your internal experience, it's your outlook on things. And that was just mind-blowing, because I didn't even know that.
No, only because being a yoga teacher for 30 years, of course you just hadn't made the link.
I should be ashamed of myself.
No, not doing that. No self-flagellation going on here. No, you've done amazing, and keep doing what you're doing. And it's a very inspiring story to have overcome that after so long an absence. So don't, no matter what happens next, whether you have a blip or whatever,
Yeah,
nobody can take that away from you. It's a phenomenal thing.
it is, and I'm very, very grateful. And I'm able to go see my family now and help my parents in their aging, and then travel and have nice holidays and apply it to the rest of life. We must look at our internal approach to life, our mindset, and address the anxiety, because anxiety doesn't always have to win. It doesn't.
What a great one to finish on. Janis, thank you very much. That's been really, really good. And I'm going to say the word brilliant. Been brilliant.
It's been brilliant to talk to you
really,
too.
really helpful. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm very grateful for everything you all do. And thanks for your time today. I really
pleasure.
feel honored.
Thank you. I'm glad we got to do it, especially with the 8-hour time difference as well. I mean,
I know.
Which blows my mind. But there you go. We worked it out in the end.
We did. Thank you very much for everything.